Hey everyone, Adam here. So what's our podcast? I have another interview for you today. I got to sit down with Marcos Gabriel, who's the writer of a new horror movie called The Old Ways. What's cool about The Old Ways is it taps into lore and history from Hispanic heritage, which is pretty cool because I like it when the horror movies are grounded in something real, even if it's real superstition. So to take a kind of spin on a story that I hadn't seen before obviously is always welcome. It was a really cool interview. Marcus was really interesting, really upbeat guy, which made it a lot of fun. And he also is big into extra features, things like that. He cuts promos, he cuts trailers, he does extra features for other projects as kind of a side gig. So when he wrote this movie, he was also part of the post-production process and putting out physical media, which I like that these indies are still holding on to. So The Old Ways is available now on Netflix. You can stream it. Sorry, there's Django. The Old Ways is available now on Netflix. You can currently stream it, but it's also coming out October 14th on DVD and Blu-ray, which was what Marcos was really pushing because they have a ton of extra features. They have a making of, if you're into making of movies, especially horror movies. That's right up your alley. That's as long as the movie itself. Commentaries, deleted scenes, all sorts of extra stuff like that. He even talks about an alternate ending in the interview here that has the storyboards and narration as an extra feature on the DVD. So like the whole package is there, like a collector's edition that you used to be able to pick up, which feel like barely exist anymore. Anyway, I'm rambling now, so enjoy the interview. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with Marcos to talk about his newest movie, The Old Ways. How you doing, Marcos?
Hey Adam, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for coming on. This should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Before we get to The Old Ways, I always like to ask creative people how you got into the creative industry. Like, what was your spark, and then kind of what was your journey so far?
Oh man, great question. I've been on the same journey, I think, since I was 12 years old, where I just started to fall in love with movies and I started to fall in love with storytelling at that way, and like banging away on a typewriter, telling short stories, trying to convince my friends to make films with me. I grew up in Florida. I was born in Puerto Rico, grew up in Florida, and went to Florida State, studied media production and creative writing, met up with other great like film school kids and media production kids. Same sort of journey, like kept making projects together. All of us moved out en masse to California, to Los Angeles. And yeah, just, found money doing movie advertising. I still do a lot of movie advertising, trailers, TV spots, behind the scenes stuff. That's a nice bread and butter. But in addition to that, yeah, keeping the creative dream alive. I mean, this is like, I've been out in LA for 20 something years. I'm always every year writing something. Sometimes I get lucky enough to get hired to write something or to pitch something that gets optioned or whatnot. And always just, the goal is to just keep finding stuff that I love writing, love creating, and try to find things that I can make with my buddies, like that's kind of the goal. So
yeah, that's cool. And more often than not, it seems like writers, directors, even actors start at a young age, or at least their interest is peaked at a young age.
Yeah, I guess we get lucked into it. I don't know, man. Like, it would be nice if I had other avenues, I guess, like, it's tough. When you do it when you're a kid or when you're in high school, it's all fun. Like, it's all amazing. And you're like mimicking what, your favorite movies are doing. And you're like, let's do our version of Raiders of the Lost Ark, or what's our version of Ghostbusters that we can just do. And it's all play and fun. And then it can still feel like that sometimes, but more often than not, it is like, I don't know. There's, if I could not feel like I had to do it, I'd probably wake up like a lot happier some days. I'm just like, God, I got to write another thing. I got to get back to it. Oh, I got to work on this again. But it really, like, when the planets align and you get to launch something, whether that be a short film or a feature or whatever, when you've actually like got the spark that started the fire, that started the momentum to bring a director in, to bring actors in, to bring producers in, to bring craftsmen all over the place in, then there's nothing like it in the world. Like showing up on set, seeing it coming together is like mind blowing and mind boggling. Watching the cut come together and then eventually seeing it with an audience. or, over a viewing party, whatever we have to do these days.
Right.
There's nothing like it in the world. And that's when you're just like, oh man, I forget about all those days where I was like, crap, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't write this anymore. Like, you forget all of that. And instead you're just like, this is awesome. And this is why, like, 12-year-old me was fascinated with it and continues to be fascinated with it.
That's awesome. That's the kind of thing that keeps you going, is when they finally, or when they do hit, and all this stuff in between, like you said, doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. And it's like, that's why whatever you end up writing, whether you're writing it to direct it yourself or writing it to make it with other people, it better be something you like really love, and aren't just doing for like, I think we could sell this. And instead you have to do it for like, I think this is a thing I want to tell a story. I want to bring this out into the world, because it's a lot of like work to get it there. And there's a lot of discussions along the way. I mean, we wrapped this movie right before the pandemic, and we still are like, I mean, we did the post on it all throughout the old ways. We did the post through it all throughout the pandemic. And then, but we still like are working on materials for the behind the scenes and working on clips and working on talking about it. So it's like, if I didn't actually enjoy the movie and, think it was a story worth telling, then these would be a lot more difficult to get through.
Right. Because you're not just writing it and passing it off, like you're living with this for years.
Really, honestly. And that's the beauty of, making something independent and making something that you just kind of believe in, and you find your friends and go like, all right, let's put our like money where our mouth is and try to make something that we really believe in, and we'll see what happens.
I like that that's an option now. It seems like the barriers to entry are lower than they've ever been.
Certainly. I mean, in terms of like, certainly from like a technical perspective, everybody's walking around with a 4K camera in their hip pocket, which is great. There's definitely some differentiating factors. Like as you try to make a movie that looks like a movie, like when you first get started, you get a DSLR because you heard someone else shot with a DSLR and you're like, oh, this is cool. But then you watch the footage and you're like, oh, this doesn't look like a movie.
Yeah, it looks like home movies.
Like a home movie, or it's not quite it. There's a lot, like when you start entering that level of the craft, where you have to make those decisions. But you can also like, the barrier for like cheating it in post and just putting your blood, sweat, and tears into like making it look better and better in post are certainly things you can achieve. So, I mean, look, when I was a kid, I had like a VHS, camera attached to like a VCR that you'd like lug around on your shoulder strap when I got started. And then, one of our first like movies in college that it got released. It's a terrible movie called Memorial Day, but that one we shot on a Canon XL1 because it was the first digital like to tape camera that you could shoot on, and it shot at like 30 frames, but like real frames, not interlaced frames. So we had to rent that for a lot of money, like now it's like, if you can find the friends that can pull it off with you, and especially if you live like somewhere that's not LA, if you're trying to shoot a scene on the street in LA, like you might get stopped because people are like, what are you doing? And everybody like knows you need permits and you need all that. But if you live in the Midwest or, just somewhere else where you're like, oh, my cousin is a manager at a bar and they'll let us shoot in the afternoon and go write a movie that you can shoot in a bar, and you've got the equipment, and then just keep working it, with whatever devices you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And from the writing perspective there's no barrier entry. You just sit down and write.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely wrote this one. This one I wrote with, parameters in mind, right? So I knew we had access to a stage that we were going to try to build a set on and shoot most of it on a sound stage, but making it feel like it was in the jungle. And we knew we had to be fairly contained. We didn't want to be a complete chamber drama. Like we wanted to stretch our legs out a little bit here and there, but we knew we needed to be a little contained. And so that becomes a parameter that you put on yourself as a writer. You also like, I knew I love doing post work. So does the director. I knew what we were capable of on the post side in terms of like visual effects, or in terms of like, oh, well, if we shoot it like this, then we can remove the wires and we can do that. So everything in the script was kind of written to be like 10% harder than what we knew how to do, maybe a little more than that. So like, we wouldn't say like, and then like lava pours in the windows and anything happens, because you can write that. But we were like, all right, hold on. I think we can do like smoke.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
maybe it's like a smoke thing. And then like, she gets lifted up and levitates, and it's like, all right, I know we haven't done this level of like wire removal, but I think we can do it. There's tutorials. We can figure out how to like do it. So yeah, like you can definitely write whatever you want on page. But for me as a writer, to be honest, the more parameters, the more like I know what the toolbox is, the better I feel I'm able to execute what's needed. It's the scariest. I don't even know how people write like Marvel movies, and it's like,
Right.
Hey, so at the end of this scene, an entire city gets lifted into the stratosphere and then falls apart and goes, and you're like, how? That was an option?
Right. No matter what you think, it's not big enough.
Yeah, or like the Matrix movies, like the first Matrix, you're like, man, that's a huge movie, but it's still like contained. And then as they got bigger and bigger, it was like, what is even happening anymore? Like there's too many like rules we don't have to follow, or not rules we have to follow, but you can do whatever you want, guys.
Yeah.
Ladies now. Yeah. And anyway, that's how it is, man. Like I kind of like a few rules to play around with so that I can properly execute whatever we need to do.
Is it the challenge of the rules, or is it just like I need to know the rules of the game so I can play the game at my top level?
I think it's both of those things. Absolutely. Like you need to know, like if it's like, hey, we're going to set this entire movie in an elevator or like Devil or whatever, like then like, okay, well, I have buttons, I have electricity, I have lights, I have a contained room, I have 90 minutes. Okay, maybe someone could be dead on the top of it, and then eventually we feed the blood coming down. Maybe someone, maybe it breaks at some point. That is super exciting for a creative mind, because you're just like, okay, what can I use around me to do this? But if the parameter is like, it's a zombie apocalypse, whatever you want to do, it's like, well, where are we? What are we doing? Is it on the moon? Is it on like what?
Too many options.
Yeah. And I had like, there was anyway, anytime that there's too many options, as a writer, you always are looking at all the different branching paths and avenues you could take the story, and you could take the characters. And at the end result, all anyone ever sees is the path you chose to take them on. But you always have a lot of self-doubt of like, is this any good? Because you guys even know what was going to happen. And then I was like, I don't think I could write that scene. So I wrote this scene. and this scene's pretty good too. But like, that was going to be amazing. I just didn't like have it in me to figure it out. So sometimes, honestly, like, yeah, if I know what the rules are, then I can play with that and I can exploit it to the fullest. And if there are no rules, then it's, stories can get away from you, and you will sometimes read someone else's screenplay or read your own thing. I mean, I've had despair where I've been 45 or 60 pages into a screenplay and realized like, I'm not writing a movie anymore. This is like 2 or 3 episodes of a TV series, and I've screwed it up somehow. Like, I don't know what anyone's supposed to be doing anymore. And I've had to either scrap it or start way earlier and go like, this is the story we're telling this time. I can't do all of these things. And stories can definitely do that. Like you think you have a handle on them, and then you get to the last act and you're like, I think everyone's just punching each other. I don't even know what they were doing. Like,
For sure. Yeah. And I imagine that is doubly true for like genre stuff, like supernatural thriller kind of things. Like you can go anywhere, it's supernatural, so it can easily just get out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. And like even in the old ways, for those who have seen it or will see it without getting too spoilery, but our last act was definitely going to be like the first time I wrote it, it was like ethereal and like this magical place, and it was very like crazy ass world building stuff for that, just our final like 20 minutes of the movie. But once we actually got into production, it was like, we didn't know how we were going to build that set. We didn't have the money to do it. And so I had to rethink that. And it was not just rethinking it in the way of like, oh, we'll just set it here instead. It was like, all right, hold on. We have to like retrack this journey for our character so that when we get to the finale that's in the movie, it is the right finale for where we were. So there's like adjustments throughout to get you there. Ultimately, it was like absolutely the better decision what ended up on screen. There's no regret about it. However, on Blu-ray, I think we will have the storyboard sequence of that particularly ethereal, more fantasy driven kind of ending of the movie. So that'll be accessible at least for anyone who's curious enough to check it out.
I love that you're doing physical media and extra features still. I think people need to hold on to that.
Yeah, we love it. As like I said earlier, I do movie advertising as well. So does the director of the film. And so we've done these behind the scenes and featurettes and mini docs for other movies. And so we definitely wanted to capture that while we were on set as much as possible. We had some people shooting it entirely. We had our own cell phones and stuff. When something cool was kind of happening, we were kind of capturing it at the same time, knowing that even for us, we were like, man, it'd be cool to just capture this experience and have something that later on we can look at and be like, oh my God, look how young that person is. And this person's now a huge star, or like really, a known person. So we were excited to do that stuff. And then it also made a lot of the decision-making a little easier, knowing that we were going to at least try to have a physical media or a physical release eventually, because we, like the first cut of the movie, honestly, was, I think, 2.5 hours long, which was way too long for it was more a rough cut, but way, way too long. So it definitely made cutting certain scenes, moments, things like that a lot easier to do, because we would just kind of say like, oh, but we'll have the full version on the Blu-ray eventually, or like this scene, okay, it'll be on the Blu-ray. It doesn't need to be on the movie, it'll be on the Blu-ray. So that was definitely like on our mind the whole time.
Yeah, that's cool. How do you get into the advertising? And because you said you really like doing posts, so it's right in your wheelhouse interest wise.
Yeah.
Was that a like an intentional pivot? Like, I want to make my own stuff, but in between I can do this to pay the mortgage? Or was it more like you kind of fell into it?
Man, every question you ask, I can respond with both. It's kind of that. So coming out of college, I didn't really know where to get started. I mean, you'll hear that adage all the time in Hollywood. It's who you know, and I knew no one besides the friends that I went to school with in Florida State, which was 4,000 miles away from Los Angeles. I did, however, have a professor who knew somebody who worked in the trailer industry, making movie advertising, theatrical advertising. So he set me up with an interview with that guy. In school, I had done a lot of editing and I'd done a lot of writing and stuff like that. So when I discovered this, it was really kind of fascinating, because one, I knew I loved trailers and movie advertising as a kid. As like a 12-year-old, I would ride my bike to the video store and just spend all day, like over the summer, literally every day, I would just like walk down the aisles and read the VHS boxes and like study the copy. It'd be like, who will survive? What will be left of them? That's great. Hollywood chainsaw hookers, they charge an arm and a leg. Wonderful. Like I would memorize all of that, and it just became part of the language inside my head. So when I discovered movie advertising, I was like, oh, I feel like I've already done like a deep, extensive, lifelong study into this, and anything around movies was going to be enough for me moving out to Los Angeles. It could have been anything. So I kind of fell into that and rapidly discovered that I was or others around me, I guess, at the company gave me more opportunities because they knew that I was genuinely like interested in it. And then the director of the film, Chris Allender, and I both ended up working at the same agency doing that stuff. We later formed our own agency called Soapbox Films. And the goal was very much to like, okay, can we have this engine in the middle that's marketing that pays money? And can that engine fuel our other creative endeavors? So can we, continue to do this, but also develop projects and develop other things and movies and TV ideas and all that stuff. And 20 short years later, here we are. Not the easiest journey, but it has been one that, like at Soapbox Films, we work on movie advertising. We also work on our own independent horror movies and genre movies. I shouldn't say horror movies, but they tend to be genre movies. And we also do a lot of Muppets projects, which is an odd like pairing, but the connective tissue between all of that is like, it's all stuff we are really interested in and enjoy. So there's not a lot of like, no, I don't think we'd ever write a mission statement would be like, Soapbox Films has gathered together with the mission to make trailers and behind the scenes specials, also horror movies and Muppets. we found a way to balance most of those things out.
Very cool. All right. Well, we should probably get into The Old Ways. We've talked about it a little bit. From the conception, was this you starting alone, like sitting down to write and you had this idea, or did you kind of spitball it with some people and collaborate?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always targeted this to be a movie for myself and the director, Chris Allender. We've done a lot. Like I said, we've known each other for 20 something years. We met at Florida State. And so, we'd produced a couple of different movies. He was itching to direct something. I was getting really jealous that I hadn't done one of the movies that I'd written. So I was like, okay, hold up. If I write something, let me make sure that Chris wants to kind of do it. So it did start in isolation at first. I knew I wanted to write a possession story from the possessed point of view. I knew I wanted to lean on my own Latin roots and tell something from a different cultural point of view. So I very quickly wrote the first, I think like 20 or 30 pages and showed them to Chris, the director. And I said, what do you think about this? Is this something you'd be kind of interested in doing? And he read it and he was like, this sounds super cool. So keep going. And I think I would be interested in making this movie. And that was kind of the start of that. And then I finished writing the script again, largely in isolation. And then once we had the first draft, it really became a lot more collaborative between Chris and myself. He'd really dig in archaeologically with the research. And as he was trying to figure out the look and feel of things, that would inform a piece of like the death whistle that's in the movie. He was like, dude, have you seen this thing? This thing's crazy. And I was like, oh my God, we got to put that in the movie. So I'd write the scene. And then he'd be like, oh, I found this other, this region of Mexico, Veracruz. I think we knew we wanted it set somewhere. And he was like, I think this would be a really cool place. Do some more research. So the script was always, after the first draft, very much a living document. I mean, it was very like, when we would find something interesting in the research, it would go into it. When we talk to our creature designer and they'd have thoughts, that would go into the script and be like, okay, let's properly lay the foundations for how we're going to start to see this thing over time throughout it. As we'd have discussions with our composer, like that. We brought in the composer, Ben Lovett, who is an amazing composer, and he's a friend that we've made movies with before. And so like, even just on the page, we were like, hey dude, I'm about to write this death whistle in. So figure out how you're going to use that in the score. Cause we want it to be like part of the story, part of the score, and then eventually part of the demon sound design. And we wanted to somehow tie it all together. So we were always like, the script wasn't really locked until we would shoot the scenes, I mean, even like there were always a production challenge or a production issue, not an issue, but just like, hey, by the way, I don't think we can do this sequence on this budget. And I was like, okay, cool. We'll rewrite something and do it again and see what happens. But yeah, so it definitely started off a little isolated, like I drew back to stories my mother had told me about brujas and like people who cure people on the island of Puerto Rico. That was something not unique to Puerto Rico. I knew it was something that was also prevalent throughout different areas of Latin America. But she had told me some like really fascinating stories as a kid, like one where, my grandfather, her dad, she was 9 years old. She walks out in the middle of the night. She hears people chanting. She doesn't know what's going on. She opens the door from her room into the living room. And there is her father, like in a tin tub with water and people chanting around him. And she was raised very Catholic. And this was like a totally different scene. And my grandmother was like, no, go back to bed, close the door, don't watch this. And that sort of stuff like sticks with you. And so for years I was like, man, I liked the movie Serpent and the Rainbow as a kid growing up, the like Haitian, voodoo style stuff. But like, there weren't a lot of stuff with that kind of Caribbean flavor or that sort of like different kind of, it's always done super evil, right? It's not done with any subtlety. And so I kept thinking like, okay, someone's going to tell like a super cool story about a bruja eventually, because it's very, I mean, it's very prevalent in Latin America. It's a real thing. And it would just never would happen, or I just would never see something, that really cut through. So, as when you're a writer, you sometimes like hold on to ideas for a long time, just expecting someone else is going to do it. Right. So you're just like, someone's going to make this movie and it's going to be great. But
right. To you, it's so obvious.
Yeah. Because it's like, eventually someone's going to do that. And, that's why you're always like, someone stole my idea. Look, they did it. And it's like, no, it's just like, there's good ideas and they just happen to eventually rise to the surface. But it just like never happened. So I was like, well, I guess we can do it and it'll be kind of cool. And if we just stick with it and try to do something different culturally and interesting, then I think it'll be dope.
Yeah, that is cool. And it's cool that you wrote it with you being involved in making it in mind, and you also had a director in mind from the get-go.
Yeah.
Was there anybody else that you knew from Florida or your college days that you worked? Because you said you guys moved en masse over to LA.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a lot of people who we have really deep connections with that participated in the movie. So there's like, I mentioned Ben Lovett, that's somebody that's like our Atlanta connections, and he did the score for us. The editor was this gentleman named Matt Blundell, who's somebody that we went to Florida State with as well, who's been in, we've just been buddies for a long, long time. And he's he does trailers and TV spots, but he's also just an amazing feature editor. So he was involved in that. We, different producers at the company at Soapbox that, again, like we've just worked with forever. Brought on board AJ Bowen, who has a cameo in the film. That was like, he's just a friend of the court. So we were like, all right, we got to put AJ Bowen in the movie because he's like dope and super fun. And then like, yeah, I mean, just as we've come out here to LA, earlier I said the adage is it's who you know, but what you don't realize when you're getting started is who you know is who you come up with. So there's lots of people that, when we all left school together, we were just all dumb kids who were trying to figure it out. And now it's like, oh yeah, this guy's an amazing DP. And this guy's like a producer at ABC. And this guy's like running this department somewhere else. And suddenly we know lots of people, but it was just because we've all kind of come up and done it together. And then as we got, boots on the ground, started deciding to produce this movie, we had produced another movie with David Churchill Grove Visti. God, I probably messed up his middle name somewhere, but we did The Wind with him a few years back. And he introduced us to Krista Borini, who is another producer on the film. She's from Guatemala. So we knew she had a lot of like interesting cultural things to add to the strip and the story. And then there was this other dude named T. Justin Ross, who is phenomenal. He produced the Mortuary Collection, which is on Shudder right now. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's an incredible anthology movie that punches far above its weight class. And it looks so good for how much money that movie cost. So we knew we wanted him involved in this movie too. And he signed on immediately. And he was just super, I mean, all our producers were incredible, but he was super hands-on, like moving walls and whatever. Like, I'll pick up the leaf blowers to do this thing, like super involved producer, and just making sure that like at the end of the day, what ends up on screen is the best version of what we can do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you said you wrapped the shoot pre-COVID, which is great. It was probably a huge relief when everything got locked down that you were already done shooting.
Yes.
So you had like a year to do your post.
Yeah. I mean, less than that because we debuted at Sitges later on that year. So we probably, I don't remember exactly how long the post, Chris would remember, but maybe 6 months or something like that to do the post. And we ended up doing most of the visual effects shots, like anything that's really difficult in the movie, Chris handled, like creature design stuff or like smoke effects. Some of the I would say more invisible effects. I did a lot of that stuff. So like a lot of like eye stuff or rod, or, wire work removal or little things like, adding more candles to the shots, all that sort of stuff that was kind of invisible. And it was, the hardest part of doing post like that, to be honest, is we really do enjoy getting feedback from test screenings or from audiences, just from friends watching it or whatever, and just being in the room with them. Like, I've always believed, and so does Chris, like, you learn a lot, not just from like people's comments back to you, like, well, I didn't like this and I wasn't sure about this, but this part was cool. Just sitting in a room with a few people watching a movie, if you've made the thing, you see it all through their eyes while you're watching it. So if a scene is going on too long, you're like, fuck, I feel it. Like, you can just feel the air leaving the room. Or when something's too short, you're like, oh, that happened. No. We need to add more there. And if people laugh at a right moment or do a thing, like, that stuff doesn't happen until you have like a bigger crowd. You rarely have a room of 3 people that are like going nuts. But it all just like really helps. So that part, not having that, meant that we had to just, because we were doing it just like we're sitting here right here, Adam. It was like Chris there, me here, and then like our editor on a chat oftentimes all day, and be like, I don't know, let's try this, and you keep working on that. I'll just do like a hack and slash version of the scene if it kind of works shorter, and I'll send it to you and see if you can, if there's any worth in there. And we would just have to keep relying on our own instincts to be like, all right, I think this part, not this part, this part, which was, really, it was fun. We just knew we had to keep doing that because we weren't getting the benefit of like really exposing it to other people. So we were just like, okay, let's just look at this one more time.
Had to try to be objective. Yeah.
Super objective. And then to just try like big swings on things, which actually was in some ways it might've been a benefit, because since we weren't getting anyone saying like, we love this, don't touch it, everything was on the table. So we would like remove scenes and move scenes and collapse scenes that were meant to be 2 scenes into 1 scene, and have to do all sorts of effects to like make that look correct. But at the end of it, it was super. When it would work, it was like, oh man, this is cool. Okay, I think this will work. Yeah, so, right. we had to get that all done before the Sitges festival in Spain. And that was really where we had to kind of, for the most part, put our pencils down. We went back after that and did a few like visual effects improvements and things like that. But, if COVID didn't happen, it might have been a different movie in some regards, because another part of the process we usually embrace in making a movie is like reshoots. So we're like, we had just, I don't know if we were going to go with them, but we wrote different openings to the movie. Because the movie, if you haven't seen it, starts pretty in mid-res, like it starts like, right, like it skips a first act. And we still have to have the things that happen in a first act in the movie and find a way to layer that stuff in, but it jumps right into it. And we had other like trusted filmmakers that we really believe and trusted their words, but they, in the script form, they were like, you can't do this. Like, you can't do this. You have to have a scene where like you see her get the assignment and then she talks to her boyfriend and then she does that, whatever those moments were. And so I wrote pages like that. We recorded them with our cast over just vocally and like did storyboards. And when we'd put them in the movie, it was always like a different movie. It was like, this isn't our movie. Like, our movie is meant to be a movie where we start completely disconnected from the culture, from the language, from anyone around us. We cannot know what's happening because Christina has no idea what's happening to her as this story begins. So when we tried to put a traditional first act into it, it was like deadly. Like, it wasn't, and it was the same actors saying the lines, and it was the same writer writing it and the same director putting together storyboards. And we'd watch it and be like, oh my God, this is like, it's just not our movie. And,
right. It didn't have the right feel.
Yeah. So ultimately, I don't think if COVID didn't happen, ultimately we wouldn't have changed it that much. I don't think, but it was not even an option to do that.
Right. Yeah. Reshoots is not happening.
Reshoots, because it was like, yeah, we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. So have you been able to see this with a big live audience?
Yeah, a couple of times we've had.
Okay, good.
Yeah, like we couldn't go to Sitges. They did have a live component to it for the debut, so that was pretty. You had to wrap your head around it just because we couldn't travel there. But
Yeah.
luckily, there have been a few festivals in the U.S. that played it, like the Florida Film Festival, played it with a live audience. I believe Kansas did as well. There was Other Worlds in Austin, Texas, played it with a live audience. And then we did get more recently, right before the Netflix debut, we did get an opportunity to do it in a theater with mostly our cast and crew, but also other, friends and family and anyone who happened to buy a ticket. And that was pretty amazing. That was the best audience. I mean, first of all, it was stacked because it was like cast and crew.
Right.
But, everyone's like applauding credits, which if you don't work in the industry, it's pretty awesome. Actually, it's like, it's almost like live theater, like where you just have an audience who's like excited to see the humans on stage, and as they exit, they applaud. So it's a very different energy than what you normally associate with like watching a movie. But yeah, that was super fun, and it was just a great, like, literally 2 days before the lockdown, we wrapped. Like our crew flew in from Puerto Rico. As they were flying in from Puerto Rico, they were already like holding cruise ships in Puerto Rico to not like release them.
Oh, wow.
Because that's where we shot some of our exteriors.
Yeah.
And so we never had a wrap party. I mean, it literally was just like done. And it was like, okay, guys, get your stuff, put your masks on, and don't talk to anyone, and stay 6 feet apart from everyone. Like, and so this was actually, luckily, in LA, right before the Netflix release, it felt it's safer to get people together, still, wearing masks and stuff like that, but see the movie in the theater as it was meant to be seen.
Yeah, that's awesome that you got to do it. Unfortunately, in the last few months, I've been talking to a lot of people who did not get that experience. So it's awesome that you did, because I feel like, I mean, I've never made a movie, but I feel like if you do, that's what you want.
Yeah. And we were always like, I mean, everything we did in this movie was, I mean, we designed it for audiences, and, primarily we were like, it'd be great to play some really cool film festivals. So we wanted to make sure the story had enough there. We wanted to make sure that we had some, stuff that could be discussion points afterwards for people who are smart filmmakers who also want to see some terrible body horror. I can't be the only one. I might be the only one, but I don't think I am. And then, yeah, I mean, lines in the script were written as they were written, and we would talk about them. We would just say like, man, that's going to be dope. Like when an audience gets to hear this line or this moment, or isn't it great when this ending happens and whatever. Like we were always keeping the audience in mind the entire time and keeping that shared communal experience of seeing it with an audience. So yeah, getting a chance to actually do it in a real way, especially that, with the cast and crew, was just like, that was awesome.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really happy for you guys.
You,
so why don't you tell everybody where they can see it? When is October 12th, if they're reading the ticker on the bottom there, but
yeah,
how do people get their eyes on this?
Yeah, so October 12th, we'll have our Blu-ray and DVD release. It's going to be fantastic. You can see it on Netflix now as well. But honestly, the Blu-ray is going to be just super killer. There's over 90 minutes of there's over 2 hours of content on it, I should actually. So there's deleted scenes, storyboards. There's obviously commentary, but we also have a like feature length documentary. It's like a 90-minute. Like I said, we do this. We enjoy doing this stuff. So it's like a 90-minute documentary on the making of the movie. So if you're, a filmmaker or somebody who's curious about filmmaking, I love that stuff. So it has it all in there, and it's super, super duper cool.
Very cool. And do you have any like a website or social media channels you want to push anyone to?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at the Old Ways movie on pretty much everything. I think we have the oldwaysmovie.com as well. But yeah, if you just follow on Instagram or Twitter or everything, it's the Old Ways Movie. And yeah, check it out, man. Start working on your cosplay for Halloween. Start putting up some makeup tutorials. Let's make it happen. I saw somebody got a tattoo.
Really? That's cool.
Like immediately. I was like, that's awesome.
Left that screening on right across the street.
Yeah, let's just go get a tattoo real quick.
Very cool. Well, Marcos, thank you very much for coming on and talking to me about The Old Ways. I wish you the best of luck on your release. And again, I love that you did all those extra features, because that's a dying art.
Oh, thanks, Adam. Appreciate it, man. And thanks for spreading the word, dude.
Absolutely. Take care. I'd like to thank Marcos one more time for coming on the show to talk to me about his newest movie, The Old Ways. Make sure you check it out, streaming currently on Netflix or physical media on October 14th. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. A lot more new movie coverage, interviews, unboxings, all of that stuff coming your way. You're not going to want to miss out. Also, make sure you listen to So Is Her Podcast every single week wherever you get your podcasts. So Is Her Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. SoIsHerPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, videos, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All the accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series out. It's called Social Studies. It's a slice of life comedy comic about the high school experience. We write it like a sitcom and do it in the style of the 90s cartoons that we grew up on and that inspire us. You can find that at socialstudiescomic.com, and at the time this video is being posted, we have an Indiegogo campaign going on right now where you can jump on our first chapter as a paperback or individual issues at a never-to-be-seen-again price before Chapter 2 comes out. All that information, socialstudiescomic.com. Thanks.